Thank you so much for those of you that have joined us. We really appreciate it. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. If you can just remember to keep your video off as well as yourself unmuted. Unless if Dave asks us a question, then you're welcome to unmute and share your questions with us or answers or comments, anything like that. Please feel free to interact. Or if you'd rather just write it in the chat box, we can see those comments in the chat box as well. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the presenter for today, which is Dave Boram. Dave Boram is the CEO and founder of MCA Training International and MCA Resources. He has worked with executives from all around the world, from all different types of organizations. He's been in this industry for many, many years, and we're really grateful to be able to hear from him, especially on this wonderful topic, which is leadership for the two pandemics, which is quite appropriate for this time and age that we are in. And we're grateful to have Dave. He's also my father and has been an excellent role model and mentor for me in my life personally and for many others as well. So without any further ado, I now hand over the time to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Randall, and thank you to all of you that have joined with us today. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share with you a subject that I'm very passionate about on leadership, and I'm just really concerned that we have such a dearth of leadership worldwide in the world, and therefore face many pandemics that we don't really need to face if we'd had the right, or if we do have the right kind of leadership to deal with them effectively. So really what I want to do is take you through what I call the two pandemics, the two that are, I suppose, most evident to us, although the one isn't as evident as the coronavirus. But I ask you, please, if you have any questions, please unmute and just ask the question. Don't hesitate. If you'd prefer to type in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, please do that. And we'll do our best to answer any of those questions that you might have. If you have any comments you would like to add to the discussion, please feel free to do that as well. So let me kick off by just going through a beautiful statement that was made by Eckhart Tolle, who said, "Don't sacrifice cleverness for wisdom." What do you think he was trying to teach us? Any ideas from anybody? Good. Any other ideas? No ideas?
David, I can try?
Go ahead. Patrick.
Yes, so they don't sacrifice cleverness for wisdom. Wisdom is the right way to do the things. But when you say somebody is clever, I mean, he doesn't, cleverness is to take advantage quick without thoroughly think about the action of the outcome of my action. But when somebody is wise, he think thoroughly. He know the pros and the cons and know that whatever I'm doing has impact today, tomorrow, and the future.
Okay, good answer. Very good answer. Thank you very much. Welcome. Any other ideas? Okay, well done. Patrick, thank you. Let's have a look at this video.
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen, the future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
Sorry about the technical glitch during that little video. I believe that we're living in what I call the manic society. If we look at the word manic, it's derived from the word mania, which really is a psychological term for an absence of intelligence, an absence of awareness, if you like. So many people out there are chasing after success, as I find, and I work with different executives and coach different executives. I find these executives chasing something, but they have no real vision of what it really is or who they really are. They're unaware. It's also said that thinking without awareness is the main dilemma of human existence. So what do we mean by that? Well, if your idea of success leads you to sacrifice what you most value, surely that's not true success. I see people putting their ladders up against the wall, climbing these ladders, getting to the top of these ladders, and then discovering that the ladder was put against the wrong wall. You cannot replace that. Values are so fundamental to our existence, to our awareness, to the importance of who we are and how we interact in our lives. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you what I call the two deadly pandemics in the world. The one is very familiar to us. We're living with it. We're having to deal with it. It's the coronavirus, Corona-19 pandemic. And we have to live with that. We're learning to live with it. We're learning to adapt to it. And there's certain HR and leadership practices that need to be implemented as we move into this post COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm going to be sharing with you 9 basic practices that are coming to the fore. The second virus, which is far more insidious and far more rampant in the world, is what has been termed slow violence. And so I'm going to be speaking to you briefly about these two so that we can understand that as leaders, it's imperative for us to really be working at dealing with these effectively. So if you look at the coronavirus, as this COVID-19 pandemic resets major work trends throughout the world, leaders need to rethink workforce and employee planning, management, performance, and strategies. It's an interesting fact that 32% of organizations are replacing full-time employees with what we call contingent workers, gig workers if you want, as a cost-saving measure. This in itself has had huge implications for leaders of organizations and how we deal with this kind of remote and gig type working. Brian Klopp, who's Vice President of Gartner, said it's critical for business leaders to understand that large-scale shifts are changing how people work and how business gets done. Now, we've been teaching this for years. We really have. We've been teaching the fact that people have to develop the belief and the faith and the confidence in themselves to be able to make things happen. They cannot carry on relying on what we call secured jobs. My job security. The fact is that there is no more job security. Companies are letting go of people left, right, and center, and I'll give you some of the facts as we go through this presentation together. So there are 9 business trends that are emerging out of this COVID-19 pandemic that I'd like to share with you. And as leaders, it's imperative for us to be able to understand these and adapt to them very quickly. So number 1 is the increase in remote working. It's amazing how many people are being interested to know if you, listening to this particular webcast today, are actually working from home now or remotely from the office. If you are, just let me know in the chat. You can just put it in the chat box and let me know how many of you that are listening to this webcast today are actually remote workers. That means that 48% of employees will likely work remotely at least part of their time after COVID-19 versus 30% before the pandemic. And that 30% was increasing all the time. It's quite interesting. It's been increasing all the time, and it will increase much more. Therefore, as leaders, we need to think about what critical competencies will employees need in order to collaborate digitally. How will they interact remotely with the other team members, with their leaders, etc., etc. Also, they need to be prepared to adjust employee experience strategies. What are the employees experiencing when they're working remotely? Research has shown that when people work from home, their productivity increases, but not during a pandemic. It's interesting. During a pandemic, it has the opposite effect. It decreases. A lot of mental health issues, a lot of having to deal, especially mothers and fathers, having to deal with children when they're working from home, especially here in this country where schools are still closed, or the public schools, I believe, are still closed. This creates in itself an issue. How are leaders dealing with these kind of issues? And then consider whether and how to shift performance goal setting and employee evaluations for a remote context. In other words, how are we going to review people's performance when they are working from home? What kind of goals are we going to be able to set for remote workers, etc., etc.? Secondly, expanded data collection. In other words, 16% of employees are using technologies more frequently to monitor their employees through methods such as virtual clocking in and out, tracking work computer usage, and monitoring employee emails or internal communication and chat. While some companies track productivity, others monitor employee engagement and well-being to be better understand employees' experience. Number 3, is the contingent worker expansion, which I referred to a little earlier on. The economic uncertainty of this pandemic has caused many workers to lose their jobs and exposed others for the first time to what we call the non-standard work models. In other words, working from home, etc. Many organizations have responded to this pandemic's economic impact by reducing the contract budgets, but there has been a shift. Companies are really facing some great challenges economically at the moment, and so they're looking at ways which they can cut costs. A lot of these costs are to get rid of people and to replace them with gig or contingency workers. Organizations will continue to expand this practice of contingent workers to maintain more flexibility in their workforce management post-COVID-19, and will consider introducing other job models they have seen during the pandemic, such as talent sharing and 80% pay for 80% work. What do we mean by talent sharing? Well, when you're laying off people, maybe looking at other companies that might need that kind of talent and trying to set them up for jobs with other organizations, etc. Also being able to share their various talents within the organization. In other words, we're going to be looking at multitasking a lot more. Then what we call contingent worker expansion. Research finds that 32% of organizations are replacing full-time employees with contingent workers as a cost-saving measure. Gig workers therefore offer employers greater workforce management flexibility. Leaders will need to evaluate how performance management systems apply to these workers and determine whether they will be eligible for the same benefits as their full-time peers. These are things that really need to be decided within these organizations by their HR leaders, etc. Number 4 is expanded employer role as a social safety net. And this is something that's really important for organizations to understand. The pandemic has increased the trend of employees playing an expanded role in the employee's financial, physical, and mental well-being. And this is important for organizations to understand. It's not just the fact that these are people that are working for us. These are people that mean something to your organization. And if you don't treat these people right during this pandemic, I promise you, your brand employment gauging is going to be very weak. People are going to see you as not being a very good employer and therefore want to avoid working for you. Support includes enhanced sick leave, financial assistance, adjusted hours of operation, child care provisions, etc. These are things that are really necessary to consider in lieu of what we're going through from this pandemic. The current economic crisis has also pushed the bounds of how employers will view the employee experience. Personal factors rather than external factors take precedence over what matters for organizations and employees alike. In other words, what we're saying at the end of the day is that we need to really consider what are the personal issues that our employees are going through. What are they having to deal with? These issues of children at home, maybe elderly parents that are staying with them, maybe having to deal with a single parent having to deal with the issues that they have to deal with, mental health issues, that lack of social contact that is so very important, and so on and so forth. These are issues that companies and leaders within these organizations have to understand are actually critical in this pandemic. Number 5 is separation of critical skills and roles. Before COVID-19, critical roles were viewed as roles with critical skills or the capabilities an organization needed in order to meet its strategic goals. Now, employers are realizing that there's another category of critical roles that are critical to the success of essential workflows. So we need to encourage our employees to develop critical skills that potentially open up multiple opportunities for their career development, rather than preparing them for a specific next role. We need to become multitasked. We've been teaching this to companies for years now. People need to understand that the aspect of specialist is falling away. Yes, we will still need specialists, but not nearly to the same extent that we have. We need people that are multitask, that are able to do a number of things and are experienced and have the skills necessary to do a number of tasks. Offer greater career development, therefore, to support employees in critical roles who lack these critical skills. Number 6 is dehumanization of our employees. While some organizations have recognized the humanitarian crisis of this pandemic and therefore prioritize the well-being of employees as people over employees as workers, others, unfortunately, have pushed employees to work in conditions that are high risk with little support, treating them as workers first and people second. There will be a huge price for these organizations. Mark my words. If you're treating your people as just workers and not understanding personal issues that affect them, you will pay the price for this moving forward. Be mindful, therefore, of the effects on employee experience, which I promise you will be long-lasting. Address injustices if remote on-site employees have been treated differently. Engage task workers in team culture and create that culture of inclusiveness. Make sure that your remote workers feel that they're part of that organization. We're hearing more and more how people working remotely are feeling that they are remote, that they're not part of the organization like they used to be. And this is having a huge effect, psychological effect, on a lot of our workers. Number 7 is the emergence of what we call new top-tier employers. In other words, prior to COVID-19, organizations were already facing increased employee demands for more transparency. Employees and prospective candidates will therefore judge organizations by the way in which they treat employees during this pandemic. Mark my words, it's real, it's true. Balance the decisions, therefore, made today to resolve immediate concerns during the pandemic with long-term impact on your employment brand. Make sure that you're not treating people badly now, cutting people's short, cutting people's income to large extents, making people work longer hours, etc., etc. You will pay the price for that post-Corona-19. For example, great advice to CEOs and to executive leaders regarding decisions around executive or pay cuts is to make sure financial impacts are absorbed by executives versus the broader employee base. Executives are in a far greater position to handle financial impacts, if you like, than most of the workers are. So please be aware of this when you make these decisions. Progressive organizations therefore communicate openly and frequently to show how they are supporting employees despite the implementation of cost-saving measures. Whenever we go through change, and we're going through change all the time now, we always say that communication is the absolute essential to change management. Make sure, therefore, that when you are going through these changes, that you're communicating exactly what you're doing, and be open and transparent about it. And then when feasible, look for opportunities to arrange talent sharing partnerships with other organizations to relocate employees displaced from their jobs by COVID-19. Number 8 is transition from designing for efficiency for designing for resilience. It's something that we've been speaking about for some time now. Are we a resilient organization? Or are we an efficient organization? Well, they're two things that are really important to understand here. In a 2019 survey, it found that 55% of organizational redesigns were focused on streamlining roles, supply chains, and workflows to increase efficiency. While this approach captured efficiencies, it also created fragilities, as systems have no flexibility to respond to disruptions. And we know that through digitalization and the things that we saw in that video that I shared with you right in the beginning, that they're huge disruptions. We live in this VUCA environment, and these disruptions are happening to us all the time. The fact that COVID-19 hit us on top of all of that has just added more to the disruption. Resilient organizations, therefore, were better able to respond. In other words, they can absolutely make corrections, can change their course far quicker when it comes to change. They can make those decisions a lot quicker. They don't have to go through all the red tape in order to bring about change, which is so necessary during this VUCA world. Provide employees, therefore, with varied, adaptive and flexible roles so that they can acquire cross-functional knowledge and training. Remember, don't look at these specialist jobs too many times or too often. Diversity leaders will need to be involved in role design and creation of flexible work systems to ensure that employees of all backgrounds and needs are considered when the organization designs new workflows. And lastly, number 9, in helping us to deal with this pandemic and post-19, is to increase organizational complexity. What do we mean by that? Well, as organizational complexity complicates career pathing, providing reskilling and career development support is absolutely essential. Therefore, enable business units to customize performance management, because one part of the enterprise need not work necessarily for another part. So make sure that you are looking at each unit separately in terms of how you're actually going to manage the performance of people. And it's important that we make these adjustments. Not every fit is for everybody. We need to be flexible in being able to find what motivates and how we actually manage performance with our people. Now, having said that, I don't know whether there are any questions that anybody has regarding those 9 issues that I've mentioned to you today, before I go on to the next virus that I want to speak to you about, and that's the unseen slow violence that affects millions of people around the world. Any questions that anybody has? Okay, if not, let me move on. Not all violence is fast. Hidden in plain sight across society, there's a kind of harm that happens too slowly to see. What is violence? Well, at its most obvious, it's a bullet fired at flesh, or a knee pushed into a neck, or a mob storming the Capitol. In law, it's criminal, domestic, sexual, alcohol-fueled. In war, on the battlefield, it's state-sanctioned. For some, it can be necessary or proportional, especially when you're attacked, while for others, it is occasionally senseless, mostly brutal, and never justified. There's another kind of violence, however, that is nowhere near as visceral as the type of described in news headlines and courtrooms. This is called slow violence. This is harm and damage that plays out over years or decades. The perpetrators may not be obvious, but the victims are. This kind of violence happens when a society causes harm to its citizens and their property, often invisibly, through social or health inequalities, racism, sexism, or another systemic means. The victims have foreshortened lives and have suffered both bodily and psychologically. But while the impact is tangible, the blame is harder to actually pin down. How does this violence therefore remain unnoticed? Why? Why has it been able to just carry on unnoticed in so many societies? and by so many leaders. One of the primary reasons is its pace. This year marks a decade since the environmentalist and literary scholar Rob Nixon of Princeton University coined the term slow violence. He wrote, "It occurs gradually and out of sight, a violence of delayed destruction that is dispersed across time and space, an attritional violence that is typically not viewed as violence at all." According to Nixon, slow violence can be found embedded within the slowly unfolding environmental catastrophes of long-term pollution, climate change, or nuclear fallout. But it can also describe many kinds of harm that affect individuals and communities at a pace too slow to assign blame. Like fast violence, people still suffer or even die, but the protagonists of the act are drawn out and often outside the reach of prosecution. Many huge corporations and organizations, governments, etc., etc. Some of the blame might lie with an entire industry, subtly polluting an ecosystem legally and collectively, while some blame may lie with a government policy written in a distant capital years before. The point is that slow violence does not always have a clear perpetrator. These places might be, for example, a refugee camp, a village embedded on a landfill, or the zone around Chernobyl. We all know the effects of that disaster. A key point about this category of harm is that it's rooted in inequality. Such violence represents a curtailing of potential where somebody is prevented from living a better life. The point is that it affects some, but not all, communities. Those with more privilege can escape it. The nature of slow violence also means it tends to compound with one type begetting another. One example might be what we call the John Henryism effect. The hypothesis predicts that when people face prolonged adversity against inequality, financial hardship, and racial discrimination, the high effort coping that people need to go through in order to survive or thrive will damage their health through stress. Many low-income residents have also been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Slow violence, incremental to make headlines and provoke outrage, but it's not hidden to everyone. If we look at the lived experience of people who are exposed to slow violence, they can notice the incremental changes that are happening to their ecosystems and environment. While it happens over the spans of decades or generations, those who have lived it can describe it well enough. So while slow violence may not have an obvious perpetrator, and its pace may make it difficult to record, punish, or litigate, what matters is that it's always felt. So let me share with you some examples of what we mean by the slow violence. First of all, racism. It's abhorrent. It ruins people's lives. It has no place in our society. It absolutely has no place. Secondly, is gender inequality. We've seen how this inequality is played out over years and years, just like racial inequality. It's played out over decades and decades, affecting millions and millions of people's lives. Thirdly, bullying. Bullying is on the increase in most schools around the world. The effects of bullying are huge, but it continues. often unabated. No leadership to stop it, to deal with it effectively. Fourthly, pollution. Again, unabated. We have governments that couldn't be bothered. No such thing to them of global warming, etc. And here is one that is rampant. Dishonesty. Dishonesty in the form of lying, cheating, stealing, distorting, etc. We see this playing out all through the world today. Facebook has become the platform for so many people to tell lies, to put out their things in order to get liked. People are crying out to be loved and accepted and respected, but they've lost that for themselves. We see it in sport nowadays, where people have to cheat in order to try and win. You might win, but there's no fulfillment in that. This stealing of ideas and cheating that's going on is rampant. Distorting of the facts is rampant. We saw what happened in the elections in America recently. And this carries on. This carries on into unbelievable conspiracy theories, etc., etc. People are filled with fear, ego-driven fear, that they have to do this. Silent violence. And then abuse. Abuse in the form of sexual, racial, social, emotional, domestic. This is on the increase again. We don't have enough leaders that are standing up to it. We don't have the right kind of leadership to deal with the silent violence that is happening around the world. And of course, substance abuse. It's rampant, especially in the United States. It's absolutely rampant. So, climate change. Climate change is affecting nearly everybody across the globe in one form or the other. But as we said before, it's often the disadvantaged that suffer the most. So we do, my friends, have an incredible leadership crisis ahead. We haven't and still don't have the kind of leaders that are really making a difference, huge difference, to change this slow violence. So what's missing in this world of leadership? Well, why is it, despite the sophisticated billion-dollar industry of quality and mostly expensive leadership training, the existence of and access to more content on excellent leadership than ever before, are we still making the same mistakes? Still plagued by weak, toxic, and incapable leadership? What has gone wrong? What have we missed? The missing link in why we are where we are, despite billions being spent on leadership development and much being said and preached about great leadership, can be answered in 4 words: the lack of leadership fitness. Let me explain. If you went to a gym and you bought a contract for a year, and you went to the gym once or 2 or 3 times a year, you're not going to be physically fit. That gym, with all its components, would have done very little for you. If you go every single day and you learn how to use the equipment effectively, or you go 4 times a week or 3 times a week, and you're learning how to use that equipment and the components effectively, it has a huge impact on your well-being. We need leadership fit leaders. There are too many organizations offering these wonderful courses. Universities have now gotten into it, where they offer these wonderful leadership courses, where they push this leadership content. And people go and do this course, they get their diploma or their certificate, and they put it on the wall, or they use it in their CV, and now they reckon they're leaders. We need ongoing education. We need ongoing stimulus in terms of leadership. And so we've developed what we call the MCA Executive Club. The MCA Executive Club is an online platform that allows people to receive ongoing leadership from leadership gurus all around the world, from leaders who, based on their character, are making a difference to people around the world. So we offer online courses, we offer daily, weekly videos, we offer monthly live webinars, and we offer leadership library from leaders all around the world. If any of you are interested in having a presentation on this executive club, please just put your email address in the chat box and we will get back to you. That leaves me just to say thank you very much for being a part of this presentation today. I don't know whether there are any questions that anybody would like to ask, so please feel free to go ahead and ask them.
Dave, there's no question at the moment, but Almarie shared a lovely comment here in the chat box. She said, corporate culture with embedded negative conditioning and controlling over years are evident and could also be a slow violence, too slow and silent to be traced.
A very good point, Almarie. Very, very good point. Yeah, we find that a lot of the corporate culture is disempowering and certainly not empowering. And in fact, the corporate culture for a lot of organizations isn't really a culture, it's just happened. It's not really directed in any way. And that comes back to the leadership aspect of it again. So a very valid point. Thank you very much. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any questions at this time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you much, everybody. It's been wonderful having you with us today. And I'll hand the time back to Raynor. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Let me get my video back up. Good. So thank you everyone for attending. We're grateful for you, grateful for Dave for the wonderful presentation. I think it was very enlightening for me. I really enjoyed it. It got me thinking, and hopefully it's inspired something within you. Thank you so much again for attending. We hope to see you at our next webcast. We will be chatting about some more things. I think our next one is by Michael Puffett, which is really, really exciting, where he'll, because it was just so well received, so it's back due to popular demand, where he's going to be talking about the different leadership profiles. I attended the first one. It was very, very interesting, and I'm sure if you didn't attend that, you'll really find that beneficial and quite interesting as well. So thank you so much. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.